Hello and welcome to Library Drawing Party. Today we're going to be drawing this beautiful cabin. To get started, we're going to be using a rainbow watercolor set. And I want to start with the roof of the cabin. So I'm going to be using a dark brown. And I'm going to be using a lot of water so I can apply a light coat to start. So it's going to be a rectangular shape. And there's going to be some variation in the wood, so some parts are going to be darker and some parts are going to be lighter. And there's actually a little piece that juts out into the tree here. And then the bottom of the roof is going to be a nice dark line, so we want to get our brush pretty dry so we can get a lot of pigment on the brush. I also want to emphasize the top of the roof and the sides. I'm going to add in some lines to emphasize the shingles. I'm going to even put some vertical lines to suggest each of the shingles. Okay, next, let's use that same dark brown and draw in our windows. So these are going to be two rectangles. You want to leave some space in between them because we're going to put a wreath in the center. You want this to be nice and dark. You could also use colored pencils for this step. And then you're going to draw in lines in between to show the window panes. I'm going to take that same dark brown and I'm going to add in some of the stones by just dabbing my brush. You want them to be smaller than the windows, but they can be varying sizes. You want it to feel random, so you want there to be some clumps in some areas and more sparse in other areas. Then I'm going to take a light brown, which if you don't have a light brown, you can mix some orange with the dark brown to give it a slightly different color. Then I'm going to take a peach color to fill it in. If you don't have peach, you can take that light brown color you just mixed and mix in a little bit of red. It's almost like a pink tone. You can add water to thin it out. Okay. I want to add in a little terracotta color too. So that's similar to the peach color, but you would add in a little more red. This helps show the variation in the stone. I'm going to use that same color to fill in our windows. I'm going to use some more of the light brown as well. And then I'm going to put in a bit of dark brown too. And I'm going to take my light brown and I'm going to be painting in benches. So we want two rectangles that are going to be longer than the windows, and then a thin rectangle underneath it for the seat for the bench. Then I'm going to take the dark brown we used for the roof. I'm going to draw some vertical lines for the back, and then I'm going to draw some horizontal lines for the boards. This is a wooden bench. You can also do this with colored pencils. You're just going to want to wait for the drawing to dry. Now at this stage, I want to take some gray. If you don't have gray, gray is a great opportunity to use what I love to call the scraps. So if you had been mixing a color in a previous project and you have some left over, you could use it to mix the gray. But gray is just going to be a combination of many different colors. And I'm using this to create a path in my painting. So I want it to go around the cabin, and then I want it to come out into the forest. Nice pathway. Then I'm going to go back to my dark brown and add in the tree. I want this to be pretty light, so I'm using a lot of water because I want to blend colors on top. So I'm going to take my light brown, mix that in. Add a highlight on the side. Add some more dark brown shadow on the left. Add in some more texture. And then while I have these colors on my brush, I'm going to draw in some branches. And you want this to be pretty organic, so you can go where the brush takes you. You want to have some thick branches that connect back to the trunk, but then you also want to have some thin branches that come off of the main branches. Okay. Then I'm going to actually take some gray to do a tree in the background. Give it a little variation from the tree in the foreground. And I'll use my light brown and a bit of dark brown. I want to just make sure that this color is slightly different than the one in the front, because we want the one in the front to stand out. Add in a little bit more of the light brown to the tree in the front, especially towards the branches. Then we have some greenery, so let's add in the greenery before we have everything painted. So there's going to be some greenery that's blocking the edge of the bench. And there's going to be some in the background here, and some blocks the other edge of the bench. And that comes down to where we have a tree. I'm going to take my dark brown and I'm going to make a rectangle right in the center in between the two benches. This is like a flower bed. I'm going to take dark green and add some to our flower bed. Then I'm going to draw in a wreath in between the two windows. You're going to want to make sure your brush is nice and dry for this, so that you can get that nice dark pigment and it doesn't blend in with the stones. Then next, let's work on the trees on the other side. So I'm going to take a light brown actually, and I'm going to put a tree in the background here. I'm going to take my dark brown, I'm going to add in some thinner trees. This almost looks like a shrub front. Put in some branches. And then while I have my dark brown on my brush, I'm going to use that for the leaves that have fallen on the ground. I'm going to take my light brown, add that. You can add some orange to this too. This is a lot of fall colors in the scene. And then there's some orange leaves on this tree, so I'm going to add that by having a very dry brush, and then I'm going to use the side of my brush as the leaf pattern. Then I'm just going to add that to the branches. And add some leaves to the tree in the foreground with that same light brown color. Add in a bit more dark brown. I'm going to actually add in some shadow for the trees, which is going across our walkway. I'm going to add in some more leaves on the ground. And some shadow in my tree. The light source is coming this way, so we want to make sure our heaviest shadow is on the left side. I'm going to hint at some other trees in the background, but we don't need to see all of them. And then there's an evergreen here. I'm going to add in some shadow while I have the brown on my brush. Then I'm going to take green and paint over that. So we're using triangular shapes for this to capture those evergreens. You can use some of that green in the background behind the foreground tree, or the tree with the leaves that are light brown or orange. And I'm going to put some leaves back here. Then you want to clean your brush really well. And you can add in some blue for the sky. You don't want this to be pretty light, so it's not competing too much. The blue is nice contrast to the orange of the browns. Once you have your watercolor base complete, you can choose to leave it like this, or if you'd like to add in more details, you can use your watercolor pencils if your drawing is still wet, or you can use regular color pencils if your drawing is dry. So for some more details, we can use a dark brown to really bring out the straight lines of the roof. So I started with the bottom and now I'm working on the top. And you can even add in individual shingles. So these are going to be little squares that go across, and they don't have to be perfect because there would be some variations in the shingles. Or you could draw straight lines across. You could use a ruler for this if you want. And you can draw the lines going down. Make almost like a grid pattern. Similar to a cross-hatching technique. You can add in some more lines. So you get to see more of that wood texture. Then you can use that same dark brown to emphasize the windows. And then perhaps even draw some lines going across diagonally. For the wreath, you could draw in little circles to show the leaves and help give more definition to your wreath. You can add in some red dots if you'd like it to have some holly or maybe some decorations. You can take the dark brown that we used for the roof and define our flower box. And we can take the green that we used for the wreath to define our shrubbery or shrubs. Use a different green. Give some variation. For our benches, you can use some more of that dark brown from the roof, add in some lines and texture. But parts that are covered by the bushes, we want those to stay covered. So you have to be strategic about where you add in lines for the benches. You can take a black and use that to define our walkway a bit more, or add in some more shadows from the trees. You can take a dark brown and add in some more branches and define the branches we already have. You can use that dark brown to add in some more texture to the trunk and the trunk in the background. And to our smaller trees on the right hand side and the big tree in the background. take a pine green color and add in some branches for our evergreen. I want to make sure that these are mostly diagonal lines going down to follow the natural pattern for the evergreen trees. You can use that same color to emphasize the shrubbery, to emphasize the shrubs near the trees, and give some more texture. You can add in some green to the leaves on the ground, or some light brown. Use the light brown to emphasize some of the leaves on the trees. I'm using it to give some shadow underneath. I'm going to use some brown here for the background. I'm going to take a bit of black for some shadow underneath the roof, and a little bit underneath the windows, maybe by the benches, and on the side of the tree trunk, and some on the trunk in the back. Add in a bit of branches. Then take some yellow and put some highlights on the leaves. Add some highlights above. And take a blue, sky blue, fill in any spots I may have missed with my watercolors for the background. And take some black and use that for some variation in the roof. And a little bit on the trunks. Add in some red flowers in our flower bed. Maybe some hints of red in the shrubs. Perhaps that's where our wreath came from. And there you have it. That's our cabin. Thank you for joining us in this week's library drawing party. We have library drawing parties every Wednesday at 7 p.m. And keep being creative.